17 years. 17 long years of shared memories, whispered promises, and carefully constructed dreams, all built on a foundation of lies. When Sheriff Clinton Dalton pulled that trigger, it wasn't just a bullet he unleashed. It was 17 years of betrayal, heartbreak, and rage boiling over in an instant. His voice, trembling with a mix of disbelief and fury, carried only one damning sentence. "You're not who you said you were." Those words would echo far beyond the four walls of their quiet suburban home, reverberating through the city of Atlanta and shocking the entire nation. How could a seasoned lawman, someone sworn to uphold justice, to protect and serve, become a killer in the blink of an eye? What kind of secret could be so devastating, so unimaginable, that it shattered nearly 2 decades of trust and devotion? Tonight, we pull back the curtain on a story so bizarre, so deeply twisted, it defies logic, and yet, every chilling detail is brutally, horrifyingly real. Was this the desperate act of a broken man pushed beyond reason? Or was it something darker? A cold, calculated decision to silence a secret he couldn't live with, or allow to become public? As we dig deeper into this tragic case, we're forced to ask ourselves uncomfortable questions. When love is built on a lie, does the betrayal excuse the violence? Or does it reveal something even more monstrous lurking beneath the surface? Stay with us as we unravel the harrowing truth behind a marriage torn apart by secrets, and a decision that ended in bloodshed. Because in the end, the scariest lies are the ones we never see coming. Atlanta has always been a city of contrasts. Bright lights and dark alleys. Political power and whispered corruption. A place where ambition thrives, and sometimes where secrets fester. Over the years, Atlanta has weathered its share of scandals, crooked politicians, explosive trials, and betrayals that tore through the headlines like wildfire. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared this city for the chilling, almost unbelievable story that erupted in August of 2025. A story that would leave even the most hardened reporters stunned, and the public questioning everything they thought they knew about trust, loyalty, and the masks we wear. At the heart of the storm stood a man once regarded as one of Atlanta's finest, Sheriff Clinton Dalton, a veteran of the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, a man who had built his career and his reputation on principles of honor, duty, and unwavering integrity. Dalton was the kind of lawman who showed up when it mattered. He was respected by colleagues, admired by the public, even feared by criminals who knew he played by the book, but played hard. For nearly 3 decades, he wore the badge with pride, presenting himself as a symbol of justice in a city often torn by chaos. But in a single blood-soaked night, all of that came crashing down. Sheriff Dalton didn't find himself in the news for capturing a fugitive, or for solving a cold case. No, he found himself behind bars, accused of the ultimate betrayal. The cold-blooded murder of his own wife. The woman he had loved. The woman he had vowed to protect. The woman he thought he knew better than anyone else in the world. But as investigators would soon uncover, the reality was far more sinister. The woman known to friends and family as Vanessa Dalton had been hiding a secret so explosive, so shattering, that it would destroy everything in its path. A secret kept hidden meticulously for nearly 20 years. Behind the smiles, the holiday cards, the quiet Sunday mornings, there was a truth so unimaginable, it reads almost like the plot of a psychological thriller, except every single detail was terrifyingly real. Tonight, we're not just telling a story. We're peeling back the layers of a tragedy built on deception, a marriage rotted from the inside by lies, and a revelation so devastating, it led a respected lawman to commit an irreversible act of violence. Was this simply a crime of passion, a moment of uncontrollable rage triggered by ultimate betrayal? Or was there something even darker simmering beneath the surface all along? How could 2 people share a life so closely intertwined, vacations, birthdays, anniversaries, and yet remain total strangers in the ways that mattered most? What does it say about the fragile nature of trust, and how easily it can shatter under the weight of a single brutal truth? And maybe most haunting of all, if a man like Clinton Dalton, a pillar of law and order, could be driven to murder by a secret he never saw coming, what does that mean for the rest of us? Can any relationship, any bond, no matter how strong, survive when it's built on a lie? Tonight, we confront these uncomfortable truths head-on. We'll explore how the carefully constructed facade of a perfect marriage slowly crumbled under the unbearable weight of secrecy. We'll walk you through the chilling moments that led from discovery, to confrontation, to death. And we'll examine the lasting scars this case left on a city already weary from betrayal. Because the truth is, no matter how close we think we are to someone, no matter how many years we've spent by their side, there are some secrets so dark, so deeply buried, that when they finally come to light, the fallout is nothing short of catastrophic. How well do you really know the person sleeping next to you? It's a question that will echo throughout this story, and by the end, you might find yourself wondering if you could ever truly know anyone at all. Cue low, ominous music as the screen fades to black. Clinton Dalton wasn't just any man. He was a towering figure in the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, a man who had dedicated 27 years of his life to the force, earning respect from his peers and admiration from the public. He was the kind of man who embodied duty, the kind of man who wore his badge with pride, who took pride in keeping his community safe, even if it meant sacrificing parts of himself. His career was marked by commendations for bravery, recognition for his unyielding sense of justice, and accolades that acknowledged the sacrifices he made to keep the streets of Atlanta safe. His resolve was unwavering, and to his colleagues, Clinton Dalton was the epitome of what it meant to be a lawman. But underneath that hardened exterior, a story was unfolding, one that would ultimately reveal that even the most steadfast men can be deceived, and even the strongest marriages can hide a darkness that no one could have anticipated. In 2008, Clinton Dalton met Vanessa at a charity gala. It was the kind of high-profile event where the elite of Atlanta gathered to raise money for causes they believed in. But it wasn't the event itself that caught Clinton's attention. No, it was Vanessa. She was everything a man like Clinton could ever want. Elegant, graceful, and almost ethereal in the way she carried herself, she commanded attention without saying a word. Her soft-spoken voice, paired with an undeniable presence, drew people in, making them feel like they were in the presence of someone exceptional. There was an air of mystery around her, something that hinted at a hidden depth beneath her poised exterior. To Clinton she was the perfect match. In a world full of pretense and superficiality, Vanessa was an enigma, a woman who didn't fit into any predefined box. And in that she captivated him. Their romance was swift, intense even. From the moment they met, it was as though their fates had already been sealed. Friends who knew them said they were inseparable. They couldn't get enough of each other. Wherever one went, the other was sure to follow. They were, by all accounts, the perfect power couple. A man who upheld the law, and a woman who seemed equally perfect. An ideal complement to the life he had worked so hard to build. In a matter of months, they were married. It was a whirlwind romance that left their friends in awe. The couple seemed to have it all: the passion, the glamour, the respect from their community. From the outside, everything appeared picture perfect. He adored her, recalls longtime friend Marcus Reed. Vanessa was everything Clint had prayed for. She was beautiful, she was intelligent, and she was everything he thought he wanted in a partner. Their marriage was celebrated by all. Clinton, who had spent years devoted to his job, found himself completely consumed by his love for Vanessa. To him, she was the missing piece of his life, the one person who could understand him, who could be by his side through all the highs and lows. Together they seemed unstoppable. But, as is often the case in the most glamorous of stories, things were not always what they seemed. Behind closed doors, cracks were beginning to form. Vanessa, for all her charm and grace, was a woman with her own secrets. Secrets that, for years, were carefully hidden beneath layers of carefully constructed appearances. Clinton, for all his commitment to justice, was blind to the subtle signs of something amiss in his marriage. He spent long hours away from home, dedicated to his work, to the very thing that had defined him for so long. Vanessa, in turn, kept a tight circle of friends and was notoriously private about her life. She rarely opened up to others, and when she did, it was always in vague, cryptic terms. People who tried to get close to her were met with a subtle resistance. She kept people at arm's length, guarding her past, her true self, with almost obsessive caution. But what raised the first real red flags for Clinton were the smaller things. The small discrepancies that might have slipped under the radar of anyone else. Vanessa resisted doctor visits. She refused to see specialists, even when her health seemed to deteriorate. She would brush it off with excuses, with half-hearted reasons for not going, and Clinton, wrapped up in his duties as a sheriff, didn't push her. After all, they had a busy life, filled with events, work commitments, and social obligations. Surely, a couple of missed doctor appointments couldn't be that big of a deal, right? And then there were the family events. Clinton's family, his friends, they would often invite them both to gatherings, barbecues, and holidays. But Vanessa would always have an excuse. "I'm not feeling well," she'd say. Or, "I've got a headache." Or sometimes she would simply disappear for days, leaving Clinton wondering where she had gone. But again, these things seemed small. Minor. Life was busy after all, and there were always bigger things to focus on. His job, her work, the community they were building together. So he brushed them off. He allowed these things to slide. Until one day it was too late. Until that one moment, that one undeniable discovery, when the truth came crashing down, and Clinton Dalton realized that the woman he had spent nearly 2 decades with, the woman he had trusted with everything, wasn't the person he thought she was. In retrospect, those cracks, those small inconsistencies, seemed to hold the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. But when love blinds us, when we're wrapped up in the comfort of what we think is true, it's easy to overlook the warning signs. It's easy to let things slide. Until it's no longer possible to ignore the reality staring us in the face. Clinton Dalton's world, for all its strength and integrity, was about to come crashing down. The very foundation of his life, of his marriage, was about to be shattered by a secret so big, so horrifying, that nothing could have prepared him for the devastation that would follow. What secret could possibly drive a man like Clinton to do the unthinkable? What would push him to confront a woman he thought he knew, only to discover that everything, every moment they shared, was built on a lie? Tonight we explore that very question. We follow the trail of deception that led Clinton Dalton to a place of no return. Because when the truth comes out, it doesn't just change lives, it destroys them. It was a humid Thursday night in August, the kind of night when the air feels thick with tension, when something unexplainable seems to hang just beneath the surface. Clinton Dalton wasn't supposed to be home yet. He had been attending a law enforcement conference 2 towns over, a gathering of sheriffs and deputies meant to discuss crime strategies and departmental reforms. It was the kind of event he rarely missed. But something compelled him to leave early that night. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was fate. Dalton's boots echoed down the hallway as he entered his quiet suburban home, a home that had always felt safe, familiar. He noticed right away that something was off. The lights were dim. The house was silent, too silent. No television murmuring in the background, no faint sounds of Vanessa humming from the kitchen. It was unsettling. Moving cautiously through the house, Dalton found himself drawn toward the bathroom. The door was slightly ajar, a thin sliver of light spilling into the darkened hallway. Inside, Vanessa was hunched over the counter, her back turned to him. Papers were spread out before her, fluttering slightly under the breeze of the bathroom fan. At first, Dalton thought nothing of it. Curiosity gnawed at him. What was so urgent that she would be poring over paperwork in the middle of the night? But as he stepped closer, curiosity twisted into confusion. And then, horror. Lying scattered across the marble countertop were documents he wasn't meant to see. A birth certificate. Hospital admission records. Legal documents he couldn't immediately process, but they all pointed to one inescapable truth. Vanessa, the woman he had loved, trusted, married, was not who she claimed to be. The name on the birth certificate was unmistakable. Vincent Harris. Born 1979. Gender, male. Dalton's heart pounded in his chest as the room began to spin. Everything he thought he knew about his life, about his marriage, crumbled in an instant. Sources close to the investigation say that Dalton confronted Vanessa, or Vincent, right there in the bathroom. The argument was heated, explosive. Years of suspicion, confusion, and pent-up emotion poured out all at once. Neighbors later reported hearing shouting, the kind of raw, visceral anger that sets your teeth on edge. And then, the most damning piece of evidence. A 911 call, placed by a concerned neighbor, captured the sounds of the final moments. In the recording, 2 voices can be heard shouting, their words almost indistinguishable in their fury. And then 3 gunshots. Rapid, final, unforgiving. When officers arrived minutes later, they were met with a scene of utter devastation. In the bathroom, amidst the papers still scattered across the floor, lay the lifeless body of Vanessa, or, as the documents confirmed, Vincent Harris. Blood pooled around her, or his, motionless form, staining the white tile a deep, terrible crimson. Standing over the body was Clinton Dalton himself. His service weapon hung loosely in his trembling hand, as if the weight of what he had done was already sinking in. His face was pale, his eyes vacant. And then, as officers shouted commands, guns drawn, Dalton did something that would haunt every witness present that night. He spoke. His voice was hollow, almost mechanical, a man broken beyond repair. "She lied to me," he repeated again and again. For 17 years, she lied. Witnesses described the scene as surreal. The once proud sheriff, a man known for his calm demeanor under pressure, now stood like a ghost of himself, mumbling the same chilling phrase, disconnected from the reality around him. He offered no resistance when officers moved in to arrest him. No protest, no explanation. Only that one damning confession. The betrayal had been too much to bear. The city of Atlanta awoke the next morning to a nightmare unfolding in real time. Headlines screamed of scandal and murder. Cable news anchors struggled to make sense of the surreal story. A decorated sheriff arrested for killing his wife. A wife who, in a cruel twist of fate, had concealed her true identity for nearly 2 decades. As investigators combed through the scene, they uncovered further evidence of the deception. Forged documents, altered medical records, a carefully woven life story that had kept the truth hidden for almost 20 years. But no one, not colleagues, not friends, not even family, could explain how such a massive secret had remained buried for so long, or why it was finally fatally exposed that night. In the coming weeks, the media would pick apart every detail. Some would argue that Dalton had been pushed beyond human endurance, that the psychological trauma of discovering such a betrayal justified his actions in a moment of madness. Others would insist that no revelation, no matter how shocking, could ever excuse taking a life. But on that humid night, in that small, silent house, there was no courtroom, no moral debates. Only a man who felt his entire existence had been a lie, and chose, in a single devastating moment, to end it in blood and violence. The question that lingers, the question that will haunt this story forever, is chillingly simple. When betrayal cuts deeper than love itself, when the mask finally falls and the truth stands naked and undeniable, what is a man truly capable of? Was Clinton Dalton a heartbroken victim, or a cold-blooded killer? Tonight, we continue peeling back the layers of this tragic case, exposing the devastating consequences of secrets kept for far too long. Because sometimes the truth isn't just painful, it's fatal. Clinton Dalton didn't resist when officers moved in to arrest him. There were no shouts, no pleas for mercy. He simply allowed himself to be led away, still muttering under his breath, still trapped somewhere between shock and devastation. The booking photo that followed would send shockwaves through Atlanta. The once proud sheriff, with his uniform impeccable and his badge gleaming, now looked hollow, broken, and defeated. The city barely had time to process the magnitude of what had happened before the floodgates of speculation burst wide open. At first, public opinion seemed to tilt in Dalton's favor. There were whispers of sympathy, murmurs that perhaps this was nothing more than a tragic crime of passion. Who among us, they asked, could say how they would react upon discovering that their entire marriage was built on a lie? Local news outlets were flooded with call-ins and opinion pieces. Dalton was seen as a man pushed beyond his limits, betrayed so deeply that his very identity, his very reality, had been shattered. But as the investigation deepened, unsettling details began to surface. Details that complicated the picture. Details that suggested this crime wasn't as impulsive, or as understandable, as it first seemed. Investigators discovered that Dalton had been under tremendous pressure at work. In recent months, the veteran sheriff had been grappling with internal department scandals, political maneuvering, and even rumors of an impending audit targeting his office. Colleagues described him as tense, quick-tempered, a far cry from the calm, controlled officer he had once been. And then there was the issue of money. Documents recovered from the couple's home revealed a second, more troubling layer. Mounting debts. Credit cards maxed out. Personal loans with ballooning interest rates. Vanessa, or Vincent, had apparently been working behind the scenes to keep their financial house from crumbling. Private emails hinted that she was the one negotiating with creditors, consolidating debts, and desperately trying to stave off financial ruin, all without Dalton's knowledge. It painted a grim picture. A man already buckling under professional stress, now facing the specter of personal financial collapse. But perhaps most damning of all was what investigators found in Dalton's own personnel file. Whispers of a volatile temper had long surrounded him. Official records revealed several incidents over the years where Dalton's uncontrolled rage had nearly cost him his badge. Internal complaints from fellow officers described moments where Clinton's anger would erupt like a sudden, violent storm, usually triggered by perceived betrayals or challenges to his authority. Some of these incidents had been quietly buried. Warnings here, disciplinary actions there, but nothing ever serious enough to end his career. Still, the pattern was undeniable. Dalton was a man capable of holding it together under public scrutiny, but behind closed doors, a much darker version of himself could emerge. As this information trickled out, the public's sympathy began to waver. Was this truly a man who snapped under the unbearable weight of betrayal? Or had that night simply provided him the excuse he needed, a grim justification to unleash the fury that had always simmered just beneath the surface? To answer that question, prosecutors turned to psychological experts. One of the most prominent voices in the unfolding drama was Dr. Meredith Kline, a renowned psychological profiler specializing in crimes of passion and domestic violence. Speaking to reporters outside the courthouse, Dr. Kline offered a chilling assessment. "Discovery of betrayal can fracture the human psyche," she said. "The emotional devastation can trigger temporary psychosis in some individuals, a complete break from reality. But when violence appears calculated, when the reaction is immediate, forceful, and final, that suggests something deeper, darker, something pre-existing." In her professional opinion, the signs were clear. Dalton's act wasn't just a spontaneous eruption of grief and rage. There was calculation. There was precision. The fact that he had fired not once but 3 times in rapid, deliberate succession, each shot placed with lethal intent, pointed to a controlled, decisive act of violence, not an accidental lashing out. Dr. Kline's analysis rocked the case. It reframed the narrative entirely. Instead of a betrayed husband pushed beyond the brink, Dalton began to look more and more like a man who had long harbored the capacity for violence, and who, given the right catalyst, had finally let it consume him. Alternative theories soon flooded the media and the court of public opinion. Some speculated that Dalton had known, or at least suspected, Vanessa's true identity for years, that he had chosen to ignore the signs because it suited him, until circumstances forced his hand. Others suggested that the financial strain, coupled with professional pressure, had driven him into a state of desperation, and that the discovery about Vanessa was merely the spark that ignited a powder keg already packed and ready to explode. And then there were those who clung to the idea that Dalton was the ultimate victim, a man so emotionally gutted by betrayal that rational thought abandoned him entirely in those final, bloody moments. But whichever theory one believed, one fact remained unshakable. Clinton Dalton had killed. He had ended the life of the person he had once claimed to love above all else. And no amount of sympathy, no twisting of the narrative, could erase that reality. As he sat in his jail cell, awaiting trial, the same question loomed large over the city of Atlanta. Was this a man who simply broke? Or a man who had been broken all along? Tonight, we continue our descent into the tangled web of secrets, lies, and violence that destroyed not just a marriage, but a man's entire existence. Because sometimes the monsters we fear most aren't hiding under the bed. They're lying right beside us. The courtroom was packed, wall to wall, with journalists, curious onlookers, and locals who once admired Sheriff Clinton Dalton. Camera flashes burst like strobe lights through the thick tension as he was led in wearing a muted gray suit instead of his crisp sheriff's uniform. No badge. No authority. Just a man on trial for killing the one person who knew all his secrets. You could hear a pin drop as the trial began. Dalton's defense team wasted no time laying the emotional groundwork. They painted him as a broken man, deceived, betrayed, and emotionally shattered by a truth so profound it snapped the very framework of his reality. This was not a cold-blooded killer, the lead defense attorney argued. This was a man pushed to the edge of psychological collapse. A husband blindsided by a secret so unimaginable, it ripped apart 17 years of his life in one night. They leaned heavily on his reputation, the accolades, the years of public service, his spotless criminal record. To them, this wasn't just about what happened in that bathroom. It was about the why. To the defense, Clinton Dalton wasn't just a defendant. He was a victim. But the prosecution wasn't buying it, not for a second. They approached the case with surgical precision, dissecting every inconsistency, every carefully rehearsed excuse. They did not deny the emotional weight of betrayal, but they insisted that emotional weight alone could not, and should not, excuse murder. What we have here is not heartbreak, the prosecutor thundered. It's homicide. This was not justice. This was a premeditated, calculated execution, masked as a crime of passion. Then came the turning point. Emails. Dozens of them, recovered from Dalton's private inbox. They weren't recent. Some dated back years. Correspondence between Dalton and a close colleague revealed something damning. He had suspected Vanessa's secret long before the night of the murder. In one exchange, Dalton cryptically wrote, "She's hiding something. Been dodging doctors for years. I think I know what it is, but I don't want to face it." Another email, sent only 6 months before the shooting, read, "If it's true, if what I think is true, I won't be able to look at her the same again." The jury sat frozen. These weren't the words of a man blindsided by sudden betrayal. These were the thoughts of a man who had time to reflect, to question, to prepare. The prosecution argued that Dalton allowed his suspicion to fester like an untreated wound, that he chose not to confront the truth, That instead of leaving the marriage, seeking therapy, or walking away, he waited. Waited until rage eclipsed reason. They highlighted the methodical nature of the shooting. 3 clean shots, all fatal. There was no sign of a struggle. No defensive wounds on either party. No calls for help. Just execution. And then, silence. Dalton's expression throughout the trial remained eerily blank. He didn't flinch when the photos of Vanessa's body were shown. He didn't cry when his own emails were read aloud. Some jurors would later say that his detachment, his coldness, sealed his fate more than any single piece of evidence. After both sides rested, the courtroom was left hanging in a cloud of silence as the jury was sent to deliberate. They took just 6 hours. 6 hours to decide the fate of a man who once swore an oath to protect and serve. When the foreman read the verdict aloud, Dalton barely moved. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Clinton Dalton, guilty of second-degree murder." A gasp swept through the courtroom, followed by the sound of stifled sobs. Dalton's sentence came swiftly. 25 years in state prison. No chance of parole. Not life. Not the death penalty. But 2.5 decades in a concrete box, where the echoes of gunfire, betrayal, and a shattered life would follow him daily. Outside the courthouse, the reactions were divided. Some still believed Dalton was a man undone by deception, a man who deserved compassion, not condemnation. Others, including LGBTQ+ advocates, hailed the conviction as a long-overdue statement. That no one, regardless of their pain, had the right to become judge, jury, and executioner. Vanessa's identity may have been concealed, her truth complex. But she was still a human being. A life taken without mercy. The case closed with more questions than answers. What if Dalton had simply walked away? What if the two had faced the truth together, with therapy, with transparency? What if love had prevailed over pride and rage? But what ifs don't hold up in court? Only facts do. And the facts were brutal. A sheriff with secrets of his own. A wife hiding from her past. A moment of irreversible violence. And a courtroom full of people, staring into the ruins of a marriage they thought they understood. As Clinton Dalton was escorted out of the courtroom in shackles, he didn't say a word. Not to the press. Not to the judge. Not even to his legal team. But those final words he uttered on the night of the murder would never be forgotten. "She lied to me. For 17 years, she lied." Perhaps he believed that was enough. But for the justice system, and for the loved ones left behind, it wasn't. Even now, long after the courtroom doors have closed, long after the headlines have faded, the story of Clinton Dalton still divides people. There are those who stand by him, fiercely. They say no jury, no courtroom, no outsider could possibly comprehend the depth of the betrayal he endured. 17 years of love, intimacy, shared memories, all built on what he believed to be a lie. To them, he was a man pushed beyond the limits of human endurance. A man who snapped, not because he was evil, but because his reality was shattered beyond repair. But others see it differently. They argue that the tragedy wasn't just in the lie, it was in Dalton's refusal to seek help, to walk away, to confront his pain without turning it into violence. They say the true crime wasn't deception. It was what he did with that pain. And as the years pass, new theories continue to surface. Dark ones. Some believe Vanessa wasn't hiding her identity out of malice or manipulation, but out of fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of violence. Fear of being exposed in a world that isn't always kind to those who don't fit the mold. Others whisper of secrets never fully uncovered. Emails that disappeared. Bank accounts that were never traced. A suggestion that perhaps Vanessa, or Vincent, was being blackmailed. That someone else may have known her truth, and used it against her. Was Dalton's rage truly about betrayal? Or was he driven by shame, by the looming threat of public humiliation? A high-ranking sheriff, the face of law and order, terrified that the life he built was about to come crumbling down in scandal? Or was it something darker still? A need for control. A deep, unchecked rage years in the making. And that night he found his release. Studio microphone, soft whisper, trust is fragile, but does betrayal ever justify taking a life? That's the question that haunts this story. One that echoes far beyond the walls of that suburban bathroom. Beyond the blood-stained tiles and the cold steel of a courtroom gavel. In the end, no verdict can truly answer it. No sentence can untangle the twisted web of love, identity, power, and violence. What drives someone to kill the person they once vowed to protect with their life? Was this an act of heartbreak, or hatred? A moment of madness, or a mask slipping off? That's for you to decide. Well, if this story shook you, Tell us why. Was justice truly served? Or was everyone in this story a victim in their own way? Memo, drop your thoughts in the comments. Was Dalton defending his dignity, or covering up a deeper truth? Thumbs up like if you believe stories like these should be told. Repeat button, share this with someone who believes they've seen it all, because this case, it defies belief. Movie camera and subscribe for more real cases, where truth is stranger and more terrifying than fiction. Because here at Unraveled True Crime, we don't just tell stories. We pull back the curtain on the monsters we sleep beside. This case doesn't end with a verdict. It doesn't close with a sentence. It lingers, like a shadow in the corner of the room, raising more questions than it ever truly answers. Could you forgive a betrayal this deep? A secret buried beneath nearly 2 decades of marriage, of memories, of trust? Or would that deception feel like a knife twisting in your soul, too deep to ignore, too sharp to heal? Was Clinton Dalton a broken man pushed beyond the brink? Or was he always hiding something darker behind the badge, behind the uniform, behind the smile? The truth? It depends on who you ask. Studio microphone, soft whisper. There's a fine line between justice and vengeance. Bell, if this story haunted you like it did us, do us a favor. Smash that like button, hit subscribe for more bone-chilling true crime cases, and most importantly, share your thoughts in the comments below. Speech balloon, was Dalton a betrayed husband who snapped, or a cold killer looking for a reason to justify murder? Because in the world of true crime, the answers are rarely black and white, and sometimes, the real horror lies in what we don't know.